If you were here in the 70s, you remember the Love You Blue era of the Houston Oilers. Well, I'm here today to talk with one of the guys who was a big major part of the Houston Oiler Love You Blue era, the quarterback, Dan Pastorini. You were drafted by the Houston Oilers in 1971, first round, third overall, and you came out of Santa Clara University in California. From 71 to 79, you missed only 5 games. You played with broken ribs, even a punctured lung, and then came the flak jacket. Tell us about that.
Very comforting, very comforting, and indeed a welcome piece of equipment. I think that a lot of quarterbacks today are very grateful for me being the guinea pig because it saved a lot of broken ribs and a lot of injuries to a lot of players today.
It was designed originally specifically for you.
For me. It was Byron Donzies came into my, I'd broken my ribs against Pittsburgh, I think it was, and I was in Methodist. He came by the room, infamous story about him carrying a brown paper sack and a friend of his with a baseball bat. And I thought these guys bet the ranch and they're going to pummel me to death and take me out of there. So he just kind of nonchalantly takes this thing out and holds it over his ribs, and his buddy whacks him about 3 times. And I said, I'd like to have one of those. So he left, and 2 days later he shows up at practice, and he's got the prototype, which was made from a Navy SEAL life vest, which was a series of air pockets around a very thin life vest, life jacket. And then he had the Kevlar laid over the taped to the glued and taped to the vest, and that worked. I mean, it definitely, it was hot, but it was very protective.
In 1978, running back Earl Campbell came along. How big was that for you and for the team?
Well, Earl was a unique player. I wish he had better hands, and I've told him this for many years. I said, if I could just get you into that second level and let you catch the ball, you could turn around and run over those little safety guys instead of having to run over these guys here in the front line, the linebackers. But he was an awesome running back. We had a good offensive line that gave him some good holes. He led the year, led both years in rushing in the NFL, and the 2 years I played with him, and with Staver he did too as well. But he was a difference maker, definitely in our offense.
Tyler Rose.
Tyler Rose, he was not a guy that you could take lightly on the field. I remember Isaiah Robertson trying to come in one time when we played the Rams, and Earl was kind of knocked back a little bit, and he was off balance. And here comes Isaiah, and he's going to really hammer him. And Earl just kind of lowered his head and hit him in the chest. And the next thing he hit the ground was the back of Isaiah's head. And it happened right in front of me. And I knew Isaiah, we called him Butch. And I looked down at him and I said, what do you think about that, Butch? He's trying to get his eyes focused.
1978 became your best season, nearly 2,500 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, and we made the playoffs. You had said that Earl Campbell being there was like a marriage made by God.
Yeah, it was. It was, we definitely had a good running attack, and that just enabled us to perform at a better level because whenever I stuck my hand in his belly, the defense had to honor that. Yeah. And it opened up the passing game. We were much more of a vertical passer back in those days. We threw the ball downfield more than they do now, throwing the flats and underneath and stuff like that. But it enabled our big plays, and it gave us a good attack on offense because they could stop him, but they couldn't stop everybody. So it enabled us to really make some big plays.
2 years in a row, 1978 and 79, the AFC Championship games in Pittsburgh. Tell us about the Mike Renfro touchdown reception that was disallowed.
Well, it was a devastating play for us, and a lot of people will argue the fact that, well, that didn't cost you the game. It did cost us the game. If there was any reason that we lost that game, it was because of that. Now, would it have awakened the giant, the defense of the Pittsburgh Steelers? We had them on their heels a little bit that day, and we were all pretty injured. And that play would have tied the score late in the third quarter, at the end of the third quarter, as a matter of fact. And I liked our chances against them with the score tied going into the fourth quarter because we didn't have to play catch up. We could still use our running attack and our balanced attack and keep them off balance. We had a good defense. As long as we didn't put them in a bad situation on field position, then I felt that we could win that game. But, you know, that play is the reason you have instant replay in the games today, because it was such a critical play. I mean, you look at the replay of it, and Merlin Olsen and the announcers were just saying, at a game this critical, that is ridiculous where they don't have instant replay to make sure that things like this don't happen.
Yep. For those who maybe didn't see it, this was a completed pass to Mike Renfro in the end zone,
Yep.
which would have tied the score.
It was a fire 9, and we just, you know, it was an audible, and just took one step back and let it go. It's a play that we practiced so many times that I could actually throw it with my eyes closed.
Yeah.
And Mike just made a great catch on it and had control of it. They said he didn't have control of it.
Yeah.
But he did.
I remember after that second game, 79, in an interview several years ago, you told me that almost every member of the Pittsburgh Steelers team came up to you after the game was over and told you, God, Dad, you guys really beat us today.
They did. There's a footage at the end of the game when the crowd's running on the field, and I'm walking off the field. Dwight White's on one side of me, and Joe Green is on the other side of me. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And they both looked me in the eye and said, "Hey man, don't hang your head. You guys beat us today. You beat us today. You know it." And that's when I reached over and I tapped them on the face. I said, "Well, then go win it for our division." And they did.
They did. They sure did.
They did.
Having Elvin Bethea and Curly Culp on the defense wasn't a bad deal, was it?
You know, and Robert Brazil too. You know, we got 3 of those guys in the Hall of Fame now. And you know, you go back a few years, you got Kenny Houston as well. So we had a good defense, no question about that. And we had capable people in skilled positions on offense. And we had a bunch of, as Bum would say, they're not pretty dancers, but they dance every dance. Our offensive linemen with Carl Mock and the crew. And they did a good enough job to let us do a lot of things back there.
I remember when we came back from Pittsburgh after that second game, and they drove the buses right down on the floor of the Astrodome. And old Bum, and the place was packed. There must have been 45,000 Houston Oiler fans jammed in the Astrodome to welcome the team home that had just lost the AFC Championship game. You remember Bum Phillips when he got off the bus? I can remember this like it was yesterday. He went to the microphone, and I think Bum had a couple of drinks on the plane.
A couple of pops.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a few of us, I think.
And he says, last year we knocked at the door. This year we banged on the door. Next year we're going to kick the son of a bitch in.
That's right.
And that place just erupted.
Yes, it did.
Just erupted.
Yes, it did.
In 1980, you were traded to Oakland. Did you see that coming, and what was that like?
The truth of the matter on that whole thing was in 1978, after the first playoff game, when I had broken ribs and everything else, I went to Bum after the season. I said, "Look, you know, you remember my playing here and the criticism that I went under. I said, look, I love you too much and I love this team too much. If I'm the problem, trade me." And he said, "Dan, that's just your Italian heritage coming out." He said, "I know you don't mean that." I said, "I'm serious. If that's the case, trade me, because I don't want to hold this team back from anything that they deserve." So he said, "I'll tell you what," he said, "you stick around for one more year. If you feel the same way, I'll trade you anywhere you want to go." Now, on that fateful flight you were talking about coming back in 1979, I'm in the back jump seat like I always was, and I had a few pops myself. And Bum comes back and he says to me, he said, "Dan," he said, "you're a warrior. I love you." He said, "You're a man of your word." He said, "You still want to be traded?" And I was stunned. I was shocked. I thought, why are you asking, to myself, why are you asking me this? All these thoughts are going through my head. I had forgotten about it. It was the last thing on my mind. So I don't know if he's trying to tell me, you know, you're the problem, I need to get rid of you, or what. I said, yeah, I guess so. I didn't know what to say. And then years after that, after the trade, I mean, it was the last thing I wanted to do was leave Houston. I wanted to finish my career here. And it was just a gentleman's agreement, because he was a man of his word and I was a man of my word. And that's why he traded me. He said, "I thought you wanted to go." He said, "I should have told you, no, I'm not going to trade you." I said, I don't know why you asked me that question. He said, because I didn't think you'd say yes. I said, I'd forgotten about it. He said, well, mistake on both of our parts. So, foolish pride.
Yeah. Yeah. You also got into racing, cars and boats and dragsters. Was that more fun?
The boats were unsafe, but I always liked, I had a propensity for speed. The boats were a little crazy. I had that accident in Liberty, which, I can honestly say was the worst day of my life. But, it was a natural transition for me because I was so fascinated with speed and racing. A.J. Foyt was a big fan. I was a big fan of his as a kid growing up. Mario Andretti, all these guys, and Raymond Beadle and I were friends in the drag racing series. And he kind of got me steered in the right direction to go drag racing. So Bobby Rowe and I hooked up out of Memphis, Tennessee, and started in 1985. And my 7th race, of all things, I won the Southern Nationals and beat Gene Snow in the car that I bought from him because he developed this short wheelbase car. But we had a pretty good run. We were starting to get the hang of it. We definitely needed more money. We were match racing, which is kind of like barnstorming the country, where they pay you a fee to show up. You wouldn't have to run the car very hard. But we'd make $10,000, $15,000 in T-shirt sales, and then we'd take all that money and go to the national event and blow it. We'd blow $25,000, $30,000 for the national event to make $10,000. So it didn't really make much sense. So you needed the sponsorships to be behind you, and I had Coors Light for a couple of years, but we just never could quite get it going. And then I got into road racing after that and did Daytona a couple of times and 12 Hours of Sebring, and really enjoyed the road racing.
You wrote a book a few years ago, Taking Flak, My Life in the Fast Lane. Is it about your personal life or your professional life?
Both. Years ago, Ron Stone had approached me about writing a book. I said, if you write it, Ron, I'll do it. And unfortunately, he passed, and it never came to fruition. And then John Lopez and I became friends, and John says, man, he said, before you die, you need to write a book. I said, well, the last guy that said that to me was Ron Stone, so if you're interested, I'll do it with you. I trust you. But I said, don't ask me anything without wanting to hear the honest to God's truth. I said, because I'm coming clean. It was right after, in the most embarrassing situation in my life, when I got arrested in College Station for drunk driving, and from which I have been sober now 8 years, and learned a good lesson. But it was kind of a cathartic experience going through the book and pouring my soul out to what my life was like and what I'd gone through and where I am now, which is a much better place. But it was a well-received book. We've got interest in a documentary that we're working on right now, so we'll see where the chips may fall.
In high school, you played baseball. What position did you play, and why did you choose football?
I was a shortstop.
I figured you'd be a pitcher.
Well, I pitched a little bit, and I was drafted by the Mets in 1968 when they were the next year became the Amazing Mets. And I was playing baseball in Alaska with the Alaska Gold Panthers with Brent Strom and Jim Barr and Dave Kingman, Bob Boone, some pretty good ball players. And they wanted to make me a pitcher. I said, but I like playing every day. I mean, I'm a good hitter. I was a pretty good hitter. And they said, well, we want you for your arm strength. We think we can make you a good pitcher. I turned them down. And they offered me really good money. They drafted me like 980th. And I turned it down. And that was the year they drafted a couple guys by the name of Nolan Ryan and Tom Seaver. And they became the Amazing Mets the next year. And Nolan Ryan won one of the only World Series, I think he won. So it would have been nice to be a part of that trio, I think, looking back. I'd have better moving parts, no replaced hips or shoulders, a lot less injuries maybe, but maybe, I don't know. Hindsight's always 20/20, but I would never trade what I had, the experiences here in the city, and what the city has brought for me, and how it's taken me in, and the rewards that I have from just the people, the friends, and the experiences we had in Love You Blue. It's just mind-boggling. You were part of it. You know what I'm talking about. And to this day, I get people coming up and just shaking my hand and thanking me. And I want to say thank you. you know, because it was y'all and us together. It wasn't just us.
You're now approaching 70 years old, Dante. I'm approaching 80 years old. We both have birthdays in May. If you had one mulligan, one do-over in your life, what would it be?
Wow. I've thought about playing baseball many, many times. I mean, I love the game of baseball. I love playing it. So maybe, yeah, maybe I'd have taken a shot there to see. That's been the biggest thing that I've thought about and wondering how that would have turned out. But then again, I may have not had the wonderful experience at Love You Blue. And so if I had a mulligan, I'd do it over again here, but better.
Now you're going into the Houston Sports Hall of Fame. What does it mean to you?
Very special. And I hope I can get it to keep it together to explain this. But it's something I didn't expect. And as I said before, in the hearts and minds and of all the people here in Houston that experience Love You Blue, it's not me being inducted into the Hall of Fame. It's me with the Love You Blue players and the city and the coaches and everything in that era that was part of it, because the fans were such a big part of it. That Monday night game we came out and saw those fans and the pom-poms, I get chills when I see it. Coming back from the championship games and all the people that were lined up from the airport down to the Astrodome. I mean, it was like the whole 750,000 people showed up. So now it gives us a little permanency. It hurts that the Oilers are not here. We don't have an identity as far as the Oilers are concerned, because we're not part of the Texans and we're not part of the Tennessee Titans. We are, but a diminished history. But now it gives us permanency. And whatever this hall is, whatever this moniker is going to be, the guys that I played with can come here and say, that's us. That was us. And this was the greatest time in this city.